is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the altar again, and this time we are here with Jacab of the Almighty Defeated Sanity. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here. Your latest album, the Sanguinary Impetus, is now 2 years old. Now that the record has been 2 years old and came out at rather interesting times in 2020, I must say. But how would you say your overall conclusion on this record cycle is for the Sanguinary Impetus?
Um, yeah, it's been a weird one because of the pandemic. It's crazy because the album was supposed to come out literally at the onset of the pandemic, and things got scrambled, and then came out about 5 months later. And the weird thing is, we a lot of people said, "Don't release an album right now. Hold off. Wait till this is blown over, and then you'll be able to go on tour with it, promote it, and it will just become, it will just end up in the graveyard. Like nobody's gonna, you know, it's not gonna get the attention it needs." And I think it was the opposite because people were at home and were craving music and entertainment at home. That I this was our best selling record so far, and also just got the most attention overall. And I feel like people being at home and having maybe a little extra money to spend really helped us in a way that the album made its rounds. Of course, the touring was affected, so we weren't able to tour on this album. So that was weird because we started touring on the album like a year and a half after it came out. So the material to us felt old, and we were like, "This is weird. We're like going on tour, playing this old stuff to us, but it's still the new current stuff, and we've never played it live, so it still needed to be done." And so we did. So we did play a bunch of shows in the U.S. and then Asia, South America, Australia, New Zealand. Finally, about to head to Europe next month for just a few shows, but Europe has been more difficult with the whole pandemic thing because the European Union and so many borders to cross, and it was just not really feasible for us so far. But yeah, it's still strange because the album is now 2.5 years old, and we're just now next month playing our first European shows on it. So it's a bit of a strange one. And also, we've been working on a new album, so it's like almost we're like backed up. We need to play more shows on the Sanguinary Impetus. At the same time, we're getting tired of it because it's not a new album anymore for us. So we gotta move on.
Fair enough, fair enough. I think though the fans in Europe are very excited to finally hear this, and I must say that to listen to the Sanguinary Impetus in like the heart of lockdown definitely made a lot of sense. I felt like Defeated Sanity. You bring the brutality that really was representative of the times that we were in. So it may be old
Awesome.
in a way, but it definitely served as the soundtrack to all of the darkness that we were feeling at that time. So thank you for still releasing it at that time.
Oh yeah, great to hear that.
One thing I'm curious about is with any album, whether it would be the Sanguinary Impetus or now, but like I feel like every song has its own, smorgasbord of brutality. Like on this album, when you go like to Entity Dissolving Entity to track like disassembling the ostracized in a way. Does every song have a different approach? Does every song start differently or end differently, or is there a formula that technically applies to every single song or album?
No formula that applies to every song or album. We try to mix it up. We try to use different formulas. There's definitely always some sort of formula. It's never just randomness, and that's thanks to Lila, who's got the um, compositional backgrounds, the educational background in composition to really incorporate everything that's out there from old classical methods to 12 tone rows and jazz, and it all finds its way into the music, just never all at once. We take different approaches. So on this album, for example, the Sanguinary Impetus, we went down with the keys. We started in the highest key and went down, like dropped every other song and dropped by a half tone or so. And then the last song, we actually even tuned down to drop tuning to go even lower. So I'm not sure if people pick up on that, but you can tell how the album drops kind of from song to song. That's like another funny idea we had.
It has like I'm glad to hear you mention that because I didn't, I'm not like the theory guy, so I didn't know it had to do with like the tuning or anything. But it felt like the whole record, when you listen to it, it has like a descending sort of
Yeah,
vibe behind it. Like you really
perfect.
are heading towards. So that makes a lot more sense now. It wasn't just
Yeah,
in my head in a way. So that's really interesting.
awesome. Yeah, that was the idea, to start unusually high with high pitched riffs and keys. So that first song is like, it sounds kind of freaky, not really defeated, very avant garde, and doesn't bring. And even the first song has that descending. So then the final riff of the first song finally brings it down, but it still leaves that room to like go lower towards the album. But it starts with this like really high shifting chords riff, which is very unusual for us, but just sets the stage, for what's to come.
Well, is there ever like a does it ever start off with any album? Does it ever start off with a preconceived vision in a way, or has the songwriting process? You mentioned you don't have a formula. Is it a very like improvisational songwriting process in a way?
I think the idea comes as the songs are being written. So usually, again, Lilla with his compositional education background, he quickly he analyzes what he's writing and then figures what direction it could take. So if he's on a kick of mostly jazzy songs, then he will continue in that direction and make that album more experimental. And now currently with what we've been writing currently for the next one, he started with some really grimy, brutal underground vibe, and I was like, okay, this is the direction it's been going. And once you're a couple of songs into the songwriting, then you've found that direction, then you sort of force it in further into that direction. But it's always been that way, that a few songs have to be written before the direction is clear for the album.
Hmm. And being that because I know that the sanguinary impetus has been it was quite a long time since we got disposal of the dead, so it was like a 4 year length. So do you almost kind of like prefer to wait a while before you cultivate ideas, because even Passages of Deformity came out 3 years before that. So like it seems like you guys aren't afraid to maybe sort of like take your time and build up the anticipation.
We always, yeah, we never rush our process, and it's not entirely on purpose. It is also just simply that we all are. It's still underground bands, so we still have jobs to support our lives, and we go on tour, and it's really hard to do any songwriting while you're on tour, and then you come home and you got to juggle, your work life and still pushing the band forward. So that is part of the reason. I'm sure if money was no object, if we were Metallica or something, and we could just be paid to rehearse and write Monday through Sunday or whatever we up to us, right? Then things would probably be faster. But also, we're just not forcing it. We often sit on songs for a long time until we call them done. Sometimes they get remolded, things get thrown out, things get maybe completely disassembled, and then turns into two songs. Um, so all these things can happen, and the songwriting process just goes back and forth like that, and that's why it takes a while. Everything is pretty carefully pieced together.
Now you came into Defeated Sanity in 2005, I believe, right? That's
Yeah, that's correct.
so when you joined the band, were you looking at Prelude to the Tragedy, being like, okay, this is how I have to play, this is how these songs are meant to be, or for the making of Psalms of the Moribund, you were almost kind of like allowed to bring in a little bit of your own mix into Defeated Sanity and kind of bring in new, unexplored territory?
Yeah, fortunately, I was allowed to do that. When I heard the Fear Sanity for the first time was before Prelude came out, and I saw him live, and it blew me away. And the guy was playing Fretless bass, which is strange in death metal. I've never seen it then, and it sounded awesome. And then the album came out, and Lilla asked me if I can join the band, and obviously I don't have the same style. I don't play a fretless bass, and I have a finger picking style. The guy played with a pick, so it was obvious that I was gonna sound different. And fortunately, Lilla was never, or Wolfgang as well. At the time, Lilla and Wolfgang were like the main leaders of the band, and they were completely open to me bringing my own style. In fact, they liked my style in the first place, I think, and that's why they asked me. So of course fortunately I was able to bring that in and a little bit more chunky bass feeling and less, maybe a little bit less melodic, more brutal death.
Yeah, 100%. And being that you've
Yeah,
played with like a lot of bands before, like I know that you played with Obscura live for a period of time, but you've also played with like bands like such as Reprieve and Chaos Sphere and so many other bands.
yeah.
Has it been like a different mindset depending on what project you've been playing with, and has maybe playing with different projects is what allowed you to bring in new stuff into Defeated Sanity, or do you try to keep every project separate elements of who you are?
Um, it's, I mean, I really just, I sometimes it's hard. You can't really help yourself. You just sound the way you sound in a way, right? And you can try to go for something else, but that character and that personality will never be completely eliminated. So with Obscura, I mean, I was never a member. I was just filling in for Jerome at the time, and he was also playing fretless bass, and he had a very melodic style. He had like a lot of like chorus effects on it, and like that spacious ambient, but also jazzy style. And I was completely different. I showed up to rehearsal and I played the way I play, which is very staccato, death metal, fretted tightness. You know, less of the more fluid, fretless bass sound. And they were like, "This is awesome because it's different, and it supports the rhythm section more rather than the lead section. This shifts the sound of the band to a degree, but they liked it, and I'm glad because I probably wouldn't have been able to do it any other way anyway, because that's just how I play."
Well, as a
And
bass player, because you know, bass is such an important instrument. I'm sure in the world of rock and roll, we've all heard our fair share of terrible bass player jokes and memes. But
yeah,
like being the
yeah.
bass player, being that it has an emphasis on both rhythm and melody, do you prefer to have music already there before you start laying down your parts, or have you ever had like a whole bass pattern written that the rest of the guys can write over?
It happens that I have a bass line written that is the basis to a part of a song. I don't typically write an entire song just in bass. That doesn't really work that well because it's still the music is central, or the guitar riffs are central to the music more than the bass. And it would be interesting how it would turn out actually if you would just write everything on bass. That would be probably not sounding very much like Defeated, I can imagine.
Well,
But yeah, overall, what happens with Defeated Sandy is that that Lilla, our drummer, he's also an excellent guitar player. Of course, he's been writing a lot of guitar stuff, and he's studied in both instruments. And when he writes, he usually writes guitar and drums in one piece, sort of linked together already. So when I come in, I already have the guitar and the drums laid out, not finalized maybe, but laid out, and then I can just decide I want to go more with the drums in this part, I want to go more with the guitar in this part, and we do a lot of things where the guitar just kind of carries on the riff, and then the drums and the bass wander off and do their own thing together as a rhythm section. So that's also what makes our sound to some degree, I would say.
100%. I don't think I think in what I love about like this sort of technical death metal or just death metal in general is that the bass really does, like for instance when we listen to Hammer Smash Face by Cannibal Corpse. I mean that bass lead in is a classic.
Yeah,
It's a classic.
absolutely.
But with a
Yeah.
new band like Archspire, I don't know if you've ever listened to them, but like
Yes.
Jared Smith may be like one of the best bass, like the way he does hammer-ons on the bass, and he
Yeah,
like
that's what's
plays.
happening.
Yeah, so like I feel like it isn't as limited of an instrument as some people on the outside would be saying.
Not at all. But you need a band that gives you that room to do it because most bands don't really care to give the bass the space to do these things. And of course, you need to have a bassist who's able and wants to do it. But yeah, a lot of bands they just don't. The bass is the last thought. You know, it's first guitar, second guitar, drums, vocal, and then oh yeah, we also need bass, and then we just kind of support everything else. And fortunately, in Defeated Sanity, and I'm sure it's the same in Archspire and Obscura and all these other bands where the bass, Cannibal Corpse, where the bass is more central, more integral to the music. It's a part of the composition process. The bass is it has standout moments and even carries the music at times. So yeah,
Yeah.
but you need a band that is open to that, and all bands just don't care.
Well, because obviously you have to think of the bass playing from a very technical standpoint. You want it to make sure it fits the song. But is there like also an essence of your own personal emotion or energy that you're also expressing yourself in with your instrumentation?
I'm sure there is. Um, Subconsciously, probably more than consciously. But yeah, I just if it feels good to me, if it feels like I'm bringing the vibe of the parts, then it's right, and then I'll go with it. But usually, that happens more subconsciously, and I don't really think about that too much, to be honest.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And when it comes to, I don't know if this may be the most appropriate question to necessarily ask you in particular, but I was always wondering if Defeated Sanity did revolve, like, because I feel like your albums, just the titles and alone, Psalms of the Moribund or a Prelude to the Tragedy, these are like statements. It's not like trying to be as brutal as possible. I feel like every album title is very thought provoking in a way. Is there is there like a specific concept that's being conveyed? Do you consider Defeated Sanity albums to be concept albums? And is there a specific like external source of inspiration that's being expressed within the lyricism and maybe helps influence the music as well?
Yeah, there's been definitely a lot of influence from real events. So first of all, I'm not a lyricist. I don't write the lyrics, but
But
I've been around, the time when all these albums have been written, and usually we whatever fascinates us and whoever's writing the lyrics at the time, um, we try to stray from or stay away from fantasy subjects too much, and rather focus on just real human or even animal cruelty, like on the Sanguinary Impetus, all about animals, like cruelty on the animal kingdom, essentially. But normally it's more human centered, of course. So human cruelty, human insanities, fitting the name. So just um, to give you an example, the okay, well, there's so many, like every album has its own kind of concept, right? But you look at Disposal of the Dead, and it's about all what methods of funeral, if you will. That's why it's Disposal of the Dead, right? For example, and some of these are brutal as fuck. Like for example, Suti is about burning the wife, the widow of the deceased man at the stake, because without that's in, like ancient India essentially. Um, Without the man, the woman has lost her purpose. That's what they believe, right? And to keep her honor intact, she voluntarily gets burned at the stake, essentially. Things like that. Or serial killer stuff. Common Deliverance is one of those songs where guy's just absolutely losing his mind and going on a rampage and killing people, and it's all based on or consumed by repugnance, and people just feel like life is mistreating them, and it eventually boils over and they lose their mind, and then they go on a frenzy, which is another song, Frenzy. It's sort of, you get the idea. It's a lot about psychological um, yeah, people who just kind of crack or experience hardship or cruelty, and then they just kind of turn around in the world.
would you
And yeah,
would you say that observation or research looking outward is almost as part of the songwriting process as laying down the riffs and recording the music as well?
probably. Um, I would say a lot of the stuff is still. It's not super minutely tight on actual events. It's just loosely inspired by things that happen in the world. But then there's still a lot of imagination that we can be creative with in the lyrics.
Yeah, I feel like because like there are certain death metal bands that have had like their themes, like Deicide always sings about Satanism, Amon Amarth will always sing about Vikings, but I feel like to me, there's two bands. Defeated Sanity is one, utilizing these sort of external, the brutality of man, but also another band that I think that does it very well is Assassino, and because they write about like the brutal aspects of what's done in cartels. Like Dino wrote about
Yeah.
like this brutal death done on a train track and how they like it's just brutally honest. So Cannibal Corpse, their lyrics are very much like a horror movie in a way. I feel like it is, and this isn't a criticism, but it's like very scripted in a way.
Right, yeah.
This is like true, which I think makes it more unsettling. Like there aren't too many instances of entrails being ripped from a virgin's cunt. The Cannibal Corpse, you know. What I mean?
Right,
So
right,
like,
yeah. We all grew up with that stuff, and it's still fascinating and it's fun, but it's just been done. Cannibal Corpse did it at the time where it was appropriate, but we tried to move away a bit from that cliche because it's just so many other bands have copied that and just singing about like zombies and horror stuff, and it's just been done too many times, and it kind of lost its shock factor a little bit, like you say, the realness of actually things that are inspired by actually things that happen in the cruel world we live in is has much more lasting shock value. So and it feels a little bit more real, more authentic, than singing about something that is just pure fantasy.
well, and speaking of cliches, this will probably be the most cliche question I have in the interview, but I think it's fair to say the last couple of years we've witnessed every horrible aspect of humanity, from illness to unrest to division to straight
Yeah.
up slaughter. I'd imagine, is there any inspiration that has been flowing? You mentioned Defeated Sanity's working on a new album now, so could we be expecting almost kind of like a death metal documentation in the last almost 3 years
Interesting.
now?
That's a good thought. We're not to that point yet. We haven't started writing lyrics yet, so we're still open to anything. But we have some ideas. They're not what you're saying. Our ideas are a little different. They still go back to our human psyche kind of thing. That's what we've been thinking about. But yeah, we're still working on that, and that's you're making a good point. Like I'm sure somebody's gonna pick that up, if not us. That's
Yeah.
a good idea to like recap the last few years.
Yeah, either that or do a concept album, a death metal version of the movie Falling Down. If you want to really,
Oh yeah,
if you really want to get into the psyche of mine, just write one song about that overpriced Coca-Cola. Write another song about that bazooka hitting the crane. Write that
yeah.
song about wanting
Great movie, by the
breakfast.
way.
Yeah, what?
Great movie, by the way. I love that one.
One of the best movies ever.
Yeah.
And the final question I wanted to ask you is when you are all, is it easier to come up with ideas for Defeated Sanity, for your instrumentation, when you're more alone in isolation and there's nothing between you and your instrument? Or is it better to come up with ideas when you're in the company of your other bandmates?
Um, that's great that you bring that up because that is something that has affected us since we all scattered around now. We used to be more local. We were never like a completely local band, but at least we were like a German band and we were able to rehearse regularly together. So now that you're bringing it up, I feel like it definitely helps to be in a room together, playing together, bouncing ideas back and forth. It's much easier if somebody has a riff or some sort of proposal to pitch it to the other member and be like, hey, I have this idea. I want it to be like this and this and that. Want to jam on this real quick? You jam on it and you figure out, this is cool, or no, maybe we can do it like this, or maybe this is garbage. So it can be way quicker that you can throw a song together in just hours or a few days. You can put a song together. When you're isolated, each member's isolated, I feel like it takes a lot longer because everyone is kind of by themselves and then things get sent around and then things get lost in translation. Like you hear this part that somebody wrote, either it's a little demo recording or you talk about a tab, and it just doesn't, it's hard to translate the vibe exactly. So then it takes a lot more time to explain and to kind of get on the same page than it would if you were in a room and you could just communicate it with your instrument and your words and your presence like that. And it's much quicker to put songs together when you're playing in a room. So I feel like, unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity to do that as regularly anymore. We still do, of course, when we come together for touring and recording. We do practice new stuff and jam on new stuff, but not having that on a so regular basis meant that we had to adjust. We had to adjust using Guitar Pro and these tools that we've never used before. So yeah, that's the new way of things with us, and it's already been that way of things with the last album as well.
It's strange. Most musicians I have interviewed in the past say that they always prefer to be alone. Like they never like too many cooks in the kitchen, or i.e. the studio. So like it's interesting to hear you say that.
It depends. If you've been playing together for a long time, then you can almost read each other's minds. You can get into each other's heads. You can play together, and you can hash things out organically. I can imagine that if you're with a group of new musicians that you've never played with, and you want to start a band, that's maybe more difficult, especially each member is already kind of set in their ways because they've come from previous bands and projects and they've done it this way and that guy's done it that way. And so that can be difficult, but because especially Lila and I now have been playing together for so long, I feel like it helps it. It's much easier if we just jam together than if we're each in their own place.
Fair enough. And with what you guys sing about, and and being a trio as well, I feel like you guys have sort of like a punk rock esque sort of in the DNA. So the unity and playing together and the rawness is just almost essential for the Defeated Sanity sound.
I like that. We're definitely trying to keep things raw. We never mess with like backing tracks and adding a bunch of stuff. We keep it kind of punk rock. So that's great that you say that.
Definitely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. It's so great to have Defeated Sanity on the show. Is there just anything else that you would like to promote? I know you got the West Coast tour with shout out to our homeboys in Malignancy in New York. Is there just anything else we'd like to plug, and when can we be expecting some new Defeated Sanity as well?
I mean, I don't want to spill the beans too much. I already did a little bit, but we have the US tour, and definitely come out. It's probably gonna be the last US tour in this album cycle. There may be some one-offs, I don't know yet, but it's probably for the States gonna be the last actual tour. And stay tuned, Europe. Europe needs to happen next, so you guys will get your share. And the album's being worked on. We're actually pretty deep into it already. I don't want to say too much, but we're getting close to finishing the music part of it. And then we'll just work on lyrics and get it all put together into a nice bundle. And you'll hear when that happens.
And I look forward to it. Thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Defeated Sanity. New stuff coming very soon. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Hell yeah.